kind of the common sense that you hear a lot, and it's become cliche, and that's usually means it's true to some extent, where like if you should write about something you're really passionate about, because it's going to keep you, obviously as a writer, you figure out that a lot of it is very menial. A lot of it is just the grind, and it's not this glorious inspiration type of activity. So you better have an idea that if you're going to write something that's good, I think you better have an idea you're really passionate about, and that's going to keep you going. It's going to keep those bright spots.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 57 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, the Chewie to my Han Solo, the Joker to my Commander Shepard, MJ Kuhn. How's it going, MJ?
Oh, hello. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. And for anyone who wants a good, rollicking adventure with thieves and all kinds of fun stuff, found family, and friends who double-cross each other. Among Thieves by MJ Kuhn is a fantastic book, and you can pick that up. I'll leave a link in the description below. And you can also support MJ by pre-ordering the sequel, Thick as Thieves, which comes out on July 25th. As well, a quick note for listeners, the official SFF Addicts Patreon and merch store are live. So check the links in the description to support what we do here. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app. And subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel, where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. Also, shout out to our newest patron on Patreon, Luke Shepard. We really appreciate you supporting us over from the UK. And now, welcoming today's guest author, friend of the show, Alexander Darwin, author of the Combat Codes. How are you, Alex?
Hello. Thank you for having me, guys.
Happy to
I
have
also
you here.
have MJ's book right over there. I should have brought it to my desk.
To pimp hers and your own, but we
There
just got
we
a
go.
blank wall. I'll Photoshop some stuff into the background. We'll see how it works.
Just like 60 copies of my book. Like, wow, he's a really big fan.
I don't have any book, as I told you guys, I have no bookcase, but I should just have that behind me.
Just tape it to the wall.
Yeah, just tape it to the wall. Just the literal book on the wall. Right? All right, we're off to a good start. But to kick things off, Alex, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your books for listeners who might not be familiar with you?
Yeah, I am Alexander Darwin, as I said, and I live in Boston, Massachusetts. And my book that is due out June 13th from Orbit Books is called The Combat Codes. And it's technically adult science fiction, but it's often been called science fantasy, which is some subject of debate. I think MJ and I were on a panel that actually, now I'm remembering, was what the difference between sci-fi and fantasy. And so I fit right in there. But science fantasy is what I'm going with now.
It is an almost arbitrary line that we can never fully decipher. But
Right.
This is true. This is true.
Describe the difference between what exactly?
Describe the difference between these two nebulous things.
Right? Like, I don't know. All of it's fun to read.
Yeah. SFF.
Right? Well, speaking of reading and SFF, how did you first get into reading? Like, do you remember the first book that caught your attention? Or like, do you remember if you started with sci-fi and fantasy, or did you have a different gateway drug into the book world?
No, that was definitely my gateway drug. I just remember my older brother, who's 4 years older. I used to be, watch him play video games, Final Fantasy. I would be like the younger sibling. I would always be would not be able to play the games and would watch him, which he was telling me was really fun. And that it was fun. But the same went for books, where he was reading, the early Dragonlance, the Chronicles, Weiss and Hickman, and then also R.A. Salvatore, the Dark Elf trilogy, both which are fantastic. And I kind of picked those up from him, and just like every book he read, I would then read. So I started those super early and just went from there.
Dude, I love how so I know you're a huge fan of JRPGs. You already mentioned Final Fantasy, but like, quick aside, I had the same experience of like, I'm the youngest of 4, and so I would always be
Oh, whoa,
subjugated to
youngest
like,
of 4.
Yeah,
yeah, it's
I
like
didn't even know that.
you're the watcher. Like you don't get to do shit. You just like sit there and watch
Yes,
while we play the video games.
but
But then it's like this weird form of like voyeurism. And now I see people like my younger brother-in-law who like watches playthroughs on YouTube, and I'm like, you're weird. And I was like, I did that as a kid. Like, why do I think that's
right,
weird now?
we were doing Twitch before Twitch was a thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's like really low key, like intimate Twitch.
Yeah,
Low-key
Like,
intimate,
we were
I love it.
pioneers. We were pioneers, pretty
Just
much.
Yeah.
hipsters over here. All right.
Fucking Twitch stealing our ideas.
Yeah.
But on video games, what are some of your all-time faves?
So I'm weird, not just because of video games, but I'm very weird in that I played a lot of games in my childhood up until I was about 20, and then I just, for whatever reason, like being busy, and then eventually work, and then eventually kids, I just like stopped playing. I
Just
didn't. So like
abandoned them.
but I'm like, it's like I have this barrier to entry now where it's almost like, because I have such fond memories of like that golden era of when I was playing games, like all the early Final Fantasies up. I played like up to Final Fantasy X, and I just have like, it's like nostalgia where I'm almost afraid to like jump back in. And I also have very little time, and I know I will get sucked in. And I also played actually like some very early MMORPGs, like Ultima Online, which is like pre Worlds of Warcraft, and like a lot of PC games that were like the early Ultima games, which are fantastic. Like all the like Might and Magic, all those early PC games, I was all about that. But there's like a void where eventually I know I'm going to jump back into it, and there will be no turning back at that point.
Yeah,
I
and then you're
love
just like,
it.
I gotta write, but just
Right.
things, you know.
I know. Well,
wanna play
I feel
this
that
thing.
too. That's like I don't game as much as I used to either, and I feel like when I do game, I also just replay the games that I played when
Yeah.
I used to have more time. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh well, I could pick up all of these new games, or I could just replay Mass Effect for the 75th time.
Just gonna like pick up the
Well, I
legendary edition.
mean, I haven't done this decision tree yet, so I feel that.
Well, there's so much between like games and books and shows and movies. It's like there's so much stuff out there, and I want to have it all, but I only have so much time. So it's like I'm having to really curate what I'm consuming. But I wish I could have it all.
Right?
And
Someday.
parenting just amplifies that so
I
much.
know. I end up watching like literally. I watched like Last of Us and like Mandalorian, like the big shows. But there's so many shows I want to watch. But like I actually watched the most like Bluey or
Well,
like
I just say most of like what you have to watch during, most hours of the
right.
day has to be kid friendly when you have little ones
Yeah.
bopping
Exactly.
around. So
Exactly.
Actually, no. While Oliver and I have been sick, I've indoctrinated him to the Studio Ghibli movies.
oh,
And
There
I
you
love
go.
that.
And you know what? This is a marker of how I'm raising this child. Sometimes when we watch movies, like I told you, MJ, I wanted him to be bored and take a nap because I was tired
Yeah.
and sick. And I was like, I'm gonna make him watch like Lady and the Tramp, which is like, it's a fine Disney movie, but I'm hoping that he's gonna get bored of these dogs. And eventually he just said like, no more. And I was like, damn it.
You're like that's what Disney is.
Yeah. And then we watched Ponyo, Kiki's Delivery Service, and today we watched Porco Rosso, which is about like a flying pig in Italy. He finished them, and at the end I asked, did you like them? And he said, yeah. I was like,
God, I love it. You're like,
So
yeah.
I'm in the same boat. My 7 and 4-year-old, I've been having watch also the Studio Ghibli movies, and we did the same. Is that Porco Rosso? I haven't watched that one.
dude, that one's amazing. It's so
Okay,
good.
that'll be next up.
Yeah.
We did Totoro.
Oliver loves any kind of like vehicle, and that one is like 90% planes.
Oh,
And
Right.
so the whole time he was just like,
perfect.
either in English or Spanish, like so many planes, like muchos aviones, and just like having a great time. So Yeah.
Well, I love Disney movies and all the big ones. I'm a big fan of like Moana and Frozen, not just because of my kids. They're like a solid, really solid movies. But
Yeah.
there is something to be said about the Studio Ghibli movies in that I feel like the pacing is so different. They're less like sensory, where there's just less. It's like one
Bombardment.
frame of just the artwork and like characters
Mm.
moving through it. I feel like at first my kids were like, "Why is nothing happening?" But they got used to it, and I feel like
Yeah.
it's really cool seeing them
Yeah.
like get used to that style.
And it's also visually stunning. And I
Oh
feel
man,
like
it's so cool.
the plots are relatively straightforward. And so I feel like Oliver, he's not even 3 yet, and he wasn't like so disengaged or anything that he was like, turn it off or like, let's go do something else. It's like, no, he's just chilling with me, being a little sniffly boy and having a great time. So it's awesome.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, the best like sick activity, hanging out, watching those movies.
Hanging out, watching films, baby.
Oh, I like it. Well, a little bit back to why you don't necessarily have all of the time in the world to engage with all the media you want to. Is that another? Oh, I mean, like, you know, we're reining it back in. But you, another big part of your life outside of writing and family and all of that stuff is martial arts. And obviously that ties in really closely into combat codes and all of that. So I'm just kind of curious, like, how did you first get into martial arts?
So I think pretty typical, especially here in the US, like karate. Like I remember really early, like 5 or 6, like my parents put me in a karate class, and it was like a pretty typical. I think nowadays, no, I don't like to be like biased against other martial arts or even other classes, because to be honest, like my actual opinion about any martial art is like if it's benefiting you in any way, mentally or physically, it's a great thing. But looking back at it, it was what we would call like a Mick dojo, which is just like, kind of like a lot of kids going through these classes, and it's really just about like the business making money, which is a part of running a business. And so that really did not have, I don't think, any effect on me. Probably more of an effect was like watching Ninja Turtles and like always being a ninja for Halloween. Like my parents were super happy because I never had to change my costume. I just like literally had a black like cloth that I would just wrap around my face until I was like in high school. That was also kind of weird.
I love it.
But then it wasn't really until I did like kung fu in high school, which was actually, that was really cool and fun because I wasn't very athletic as a kid. Like I like ran, but not very well. I like track team, but I was not a good runner. And so kung fu was cool, and we actually did some like, with that form of kung fu, we did forms, which is more of the aesthetic type of thing, but also some actual hand-to-hand combat, which like hitting. But really, to be honest, we were just like, it was a bunch of high school kids just beating the shit out of each other with very little technique. Just like, here's some gloves, go at it.
Just like anger
back on it
for teens.
Exactly. But there were some good lessons learned there. But it wasn't until in college, when there was a local or at the Boston University, where I went to university, there was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu club, which was just like, I don't even know why. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. As far as why I walked in there, and it was run by, actually, it turns out, a pretty high level black belt, and it was no gi, which in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, no gi means you don't have a uniform. You're just wearing like a rash guard. So it was totally foreign to me, and I pretty much fell in love with it then. The instructor was probably about like 150 pounds, and I was lifting weights at that point in college, like, pumping iron. I think I was, feeling pretty strong, and just got like totally demoralized, like as
wrecked.
if this person had like, but like in a way that it was just like, this is magic. Like, how is this guy who's older than me, especially when you're in college and you're a guy and you feel like you know where you kind of stack up with, you think you do, and then this person just like controls you like a marionette. And I really, at that, they say that's the inflection point where a lot of people that do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu kind of like either will leave and not come back and try to forget the experience and be like, okay, that never happened. Or they're like, how the fuck did this happen? Like, how
Yeah.
did you do that? And so
How can
that's
I
really
do
where
that one day?
Right.
right. And so that was like 20 years ago. And, just been working at it since. And even now, just I teach and train, but it's the fun part is there, it's learning. It's like never ending learning. You don't, it's endless. And it's fun. And I think that's a thing I really try to remind myself even now when I'm practicing it. I'm just playing. I'm just like, it's where I get to go play. Like my kids are like, are you going to play with your friends? I'm like, yeah.
That's so cool, man. Because like you and I've talked about martial arts before, and I love this idea of adults being given the opportunity to play, and obviously this is like a physical form of play. And then on the flip side, it's like as a writer, I'm curious to get your perspective on this, like a combination BJJ writing question. Like, how have your martial arts practice and the skills you've learned there helped you as a writer in terms of like creative play or writing lifestyle and practices that you can kind of apply from one to the other?
Yeah. To be honest, I think I've answered this in the past, and I think just like, because I've practiced martial arts so long and I've been writing for a while now as well. I think my answer has kind of evolved. Just it's kind of like when you look back at either things that are nostalgic or you look back at the way things were in the past, your view of it kind of changes. And I think some of it can be answered in a very like logistical way, that could a lot of people could have a niche, whether it be CrossFit or exercise and getting endorphins in some way. So in that sense, like it really does help. Training and exercise in general really does help balance me out for writing. Like I feel like if I sit with anything too long and I just kind of hit a wall, that's really where my mind can uh, become clear. But in particular, Brazilian jiu-jitsu and grappling does something different for me. Like it's kind of ruined me for most other forms of exercise, because and I love exercise in general. Like I swim, I try to run or bike or whatever, and it's just like Brazilian jiu-jitsu for me personally really just brings me to a very mindful place where I'm not like when I run or bike, or my mind can still be churning around, the current idea that I'm working on or work or kids or whatever else. But with grappling, you can't really do that. I mean, you can, but it gets in the way. So you're just really in the moment, and having that mindfulness for me is everything for writing, because I know now about myself with writing that. And I think for a lot of people, it's just such a subconscious activity, and you don't realize it. But like all the planning you do when you actually sit down and write, it's like all just tapping into that subconscious. And I think that those two sync very well together.
Beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, that is, and that makes sense though, because your mind can still wander. It's not a fully present activity, but it sounds like the grappling. If it's not fully present, you're gonna get your ass kicked, maybe.
Yes.
So, in terms of that concept of tapping into the unconscious or subconscious when you're writing, I love that, because then you don't really think about that as much until you phrase it like that. But I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit more about the origins of when you began writing the combat codes. Like, how did you kind of find your process? Like, what did that look like for you?
So do you mean more like the concept or the actual habit
I think
of
all of
the
it. Like,
writing?
where did the concept
Yeah,
come from, and then how did you translate that into? Because it's a different beast between thinking of a story idea and like actually figuring
exactly.
out how to sit down and write the damn thing. You know what I mean? So all of it.
Right. Yeah, I think that kind of the common sense that you hear a lot, and it's become cliche, and that's usually means it's true to some extent. Where like if you should write about something you're really passionate about, because it's going to keep you. Obviously, as a writer, you figure out that a lot of it is very menial, a lot of it is just the grind, and it's not this glorious inspiration type of activity. So you better have an idea that if you're going to write something that's good, I think you better have an idea you're really passionate about, and that's going to keep you going. It's going to keep those bright spots in that grind. And so the original seed of the combat codes was I love action movies, and I love fast paced stuff. And but I just found there was, even the stuff I really love, everything was swords and sorcery, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a big fan of, magic schools. I'm a big fan of, all the medieval stuff. That's what I grew up on. But I was just kind of thirsting for something that really highlighted a lack of weaponry. And that's really where the seed of the idea came from. Like, how could I do some world building? How could I create a world where weaponry or magic in a fantasy world was really de-emphasized? And what would that world look like? So that's really where the concept of nations having an armistice where they nominate champions to fight on their behalf, and in an unarmed combat situation. That's where it all stemmed from.
And that it's like, I've heard you mention that kind of concept before, but I don't know why. Like, just the way you phrase that, it's like nations, basically like selecting a champion to fight on their behalf. I'm like, that is pretty fucking fantasy,
Yeah, it is. Well, and it's so cool though, because it's rare, because a lot of times in fantasy the story centers around war, right? Like not always, but a lot of time are like, well, war is looming, war is threatening, war is here. And you've created a world where like war isn't happening. If it does, it's this single combat, which is so cool and not something that you see very often.
Well, it's like localized combat diplomacy.
Yeah.
Right.
Really cool.
Right. And
it's pretty cool.
And also, I mean, I've obviously watched war movies, and I've consumed a lot of media related to war, but my personal experience, as well as my knowledge compared to a lot of other writers, for example, like Christian Cameron, who have studied the historical aspects of it. I'm a neophyte in that sort of arena, and of course, I can do research on that, but my expertise, both as well, having watched a ton of mixed martial arts, countless hours of it, as well as practiced, that's really where I gravitated towards.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. It's like writing to your strengths, especially.
Right.
As well. But I was also curious, like, when did you decide, okay, I'm going to self-publish this book, and then planning that out into the full trilogy of the Combat Code saga? What were your kind of thoughts going into that, in terms of like, these are my goals for self-publishing a trilogy, and how did it feel for you to kind of go through that process and get reception from reviewers or from readers? And I can't remember which year of SPFBO that you went through. Was it like 6?
It was the pandemic year, 2020. So SPFBO 6, which was that was a big year. But self-pub. So I was living in, and this has been such a long journey. It's like, this is 2015. I was living in or when I was writing, it was actually prior to 2015. It first was self-pub in 2015, which is like, wow, like almost a decade ago. Yeah, it's crazy. But I was living in San Francisco, and I was working in like Silicon Valley. We had like a little startup going, and we were really a part of that. I had a business partner. We were part of that world, a failed startup, like so many San Francisco startups. But it was almost a very natural evolution, because based on, we were in the tech mecca, where self-pub, when I started learning about it, it was very interesting to me. The whole concept of KDP and learning all of that. And also the concept of kind of what we've all figured out at this point, to do self-pub successfully, you have to essentially run a business. You have to run a small business. You have to hire contractors. And that was something that I was doing and learning already. How to deal with contractors and form these relationships that are so important to be able to run a successful business. The business was not successful, but I was learning anyways. And so again, being able to leverage this, I guess it wasn't new at that point, but relatively new technology and platform with KDP, as well as all the marketplace that had evolved around it, and as well as the advertising that tied into it. It was all just like kind of a natural evolution. So I was like, this is a thing. Like, let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome.
I don't know if did that. I think I segued a little bit there, but
you answered the first half. But how did it feel for you to then get into it and then start to get reception and expand upon the trilogy and kind of like seeing how
yeah,
but it's like seeing how your idea of like what you could do with it being met with like the realities of how people received it.
Yeah. So when I first wrote it, I really just based on what I talked about with like what the seed of the idea was, I really wrote it specifically for the first iteration of it for martial artists. I actually wasn't, obviously sci-fi fantasy was like my background. So that was, of course, what the backdrop of the entire world was. But I wasn't even really thinking about like marketing towards sci-fi fantasy. So that was a lot of luck that came into that. So I was like, I was a regular on Reddit on like the RBJJ, which is like the jiu-jitsu forum, which is like a pretty big marketplace. And I was like telling people about it there, like, hey, I have this sci-fi book and it has a lot of jiu-jitsu in it. Do you want to check it out? And like, so I was able to and I was on like podcasts that were specifically jiu-jitsu podcasts.
That's awesome.
I did, which was great. And it was really cool and had a really good reception. But I also figured out that like, okay, there's a lot of martial artists that don't necessarily like sci-fi. Let's not like, or read in general. Like not everyone reads, or is a reader. So it was very fortuitous when kind of on a whim, after the first book was finished and it had had a little bit of a run. I was like, okay, that was great. People enjoyed that. And then I learned about SPFBO and I saw that was a thing, and just like almost randomly was near the submission deadline to that. And it was just like, okay, I look like I can qualify for this. I have a book. It's sci-fi fantasy. Of course, that would become some debate in the actual contest, but I submitted it, and that gave it. When it got through to the finals of that really gave it a new life. And also in my view, I was able to see, wow, this actually resonates not only with martial artists but with sci-fi fantasy fans. And that kind of went from there.
Yeah. Well, in expanding to that broader audience, now, as we mentioned, or as you mentioned in the intro here, it's coming out this summer from re-released from Orbit. So I think that's a fascinating journey. I'm curious to hear how that journey has gone. Like, what has that transition been like going from indie to trad, and how have you been feeling as this process is unfolding?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And like a really, like my mind is like it's almost hard to like extrapolate, because right now I've transitioned into trad, and Orbit is publishing this book in about a month from when we're talking now. And I'm like in the midst of it. So it's almost like it's very hard to see like out of the mists. So like, I hope when after the first book is published, I'll have some more perspective on it. But I definitely have, like, I've tried as hard as I can to like learn, like take almost the scrappy self-published mentality and bring it to where I am in trad and learn. I've had a lot of fun, to be honest. It's like there's a lot of stress, as MJ knows, like with trad publishing, and there's all sorts of things to consider. But there's also so much fun stuff that I've been learning, and I'm really enjoying the process of interacting with like great people that are really passionate at Orbit books, my editor Bradley, the entire team, our team. That's like really been a fun learning experience, but like also way different, way different. And like there's a lot of specifics I'm glad to answer questions on as far as, you know, pros and cons, and there are. And I've actually been trying to digest a lot of that as I'm going. And I'm sure, again, just like we started off, like I'm sure in hindsight, as I get further away from when it publishes, or even after the series publishes, or hopefully after I have, you know, more books come out, either self-pub or trad, I'll have like more perspective on it. But again, if you have for specifics, I'm glad to dig into any, you know, some details as well.
Well, yeah, man, just go for it. I mean, we wanted to know like what have been like some of the coolest parts of transitioning into trad pub so far, but also some of the hardest parts about the switch. And you mentioned how different it is. It's like,
Yeah, it's like
what have
completely
been, what
different
have been
sides
some
of
of
the
those
same coin.
differences?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the hard parts for me, because again, I came from this perspective of running your own business, which again is the analogy I know that I think is very apt for doing self pub well, and having it. You're running your own businesses. You're the one dealing with artists. You're the one dealing with designers and editors and copy editors. You're essentially funding it. You're having to do all the accounting on everything. Um, and so that definitely has been a learning process that I've been trying to adapt to, not having control. Um, and I think that's something, if your book is acquired, or you're thinking of transitioning from self pub to trad, that's something that you need to consider, is like, what type of person are you? And do you really like to control your fate to some extent? Do you like to, you know, be the one that is like, you will be interfacing with a lot of people, it may be even more in chat, but it's not the same relationship. And for some people that relationship will be uh, a lot better with trad because of their nature. And for some people, I think it's not a great fit, because again, it depends if you're the type of person that wants to be running your business or not. And so I think I'm in the middle, where there was some things that I was hard for me to let go, and probably still is, as I'm sure, like my editor, the many emails I send him on a daily basis. I'm sure he knows that too. But you know, I think we've all gotten to know each other well, and just like with any new business or friendly relationship, just kind of being able to create something that works for everyone. And that's something I've been trying to do, like figure out my relationship with the various people, because again, these people are so, like, this is a giant publisher, and they're owned by even a bigger publisher, and at the end of the day, it's like this corporation. But on the more granular level, these are, everyone there is so passionate about books, and that's why they're in it. And we all know people in publishing are not paid great, and they're in it for, just like authors, to be passionate about. So I've been really
Yeah.
working hard to try to find, you know, like bridge that gap and figure out how to work together in the best way. And I think that's one thing that is tough. I think people are either on one side or the other. They like will think that, you know, it's you versus me, and you're not giving me what I want. But it's just like any relationship, you have to, I think kind of like work somewhere in the middle, you know, and figure out what
It's all
people.
about giving and receiving.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, when I was talking to people, when I first, you know, got into the publishing side, and then I was talking about how they wanted me to cut like 15,000 words from Among Thieves. Um, you know, some people I talked to were like, "Oh my God, that's like insane. You can't do that." And you know, it's like a different mindset. It's a give and take, where it's like, okay, I want to, you know, listen to these people that are, you know, experts in marketing this
Mhm.
and getting it on shelves. But I do see, like you said, the other side. I do see the flip side, where it's like, no, this is my art and I want full control of it. And that's why I do think um it's not one option is better or worse than the other. It's just what path is right for the writer. Yeah.
Right. And for me, actually, on the creative end, I feel like it's been a lot easier because I'm more I like on the creative end, I think my natural tendency is to actually embrace input. I'm not the type on the creative end where I'm very stuck in my ways. Like if someone presents me an idea for my book or for whatever that I'm working on, that I try to go into it with an open mind. Maybe I don't always. It's hard to be introspective on it, but like I try to be like, wow, that's actually a better idea. And that's something that actually has not been trouble free. So that was fantastic from going to trad. That was one really big bright point of having this wealth of creativity from editors and also from like my agent who's awesome, and being able to get all this input. Like I had like beta readers who were also fantastic, but being able to suddenly tap into this spring of creativity and really professional input, that was not hard for me at all. That was actually incredible. I think part of that though was because I had so many years after self-pubbing where this is all had, and I'd had like Goodreads and reviews from SPFBO. I'd been through the ringer. Was at SPFBO. That's one of the great things about that contest is it kind of like you toughen your skin. You get like so many reviews, and you really like Justin Anderson, who's also Lost War, by the way, out next week from Justin Anderson. Well, next week from when we're talking.
Out in the past.
Yeah, we're both
out now.
we're both SPFBO 6 alumnus, and we've both in our little Orbit New Voices Discord. We're like, well, and people are starting to get reviews, like trade reviews for the first time. We're like, we've been and we've had so many reviews already.
We've lived this life.
Yeah. So that's been great. But one of the good things is I've wanted to make changes to the book, like since it was published, like, and of course with like Goodreads and that stuff, you have to like throw out the really good reviews that are like gushing, and then also the ones that are just like, your book is completely terrible and I hate this genre and all that, and just find the middle ground. And it's like there's actually a lot of good critique in there. And I went into this where I was like, to my editor, I was like, there's actually a lot I would like to change. So like this new iteration, not only does it have like 30,000 more words, but like a ton of the world building is like tighter, and it's been stuff that's like been driving me crazy. And you think you're gonna self-pub them and it's the end, but this was kind of like a second or third, even third rejuvenation or revival of the book. So it was great being able to work with the editors there, and then the art department. I'd been like a big fan of Orbit, for a really long time as a reader. And so that was just a dream, being able to like work with all these editors and the art department that I had been fans of before.
Yeah. Well, I want to dive
a little. So lucky just that you got to add, like MJ talked about, like I had to cut 15,000 words, which is like small potatoes, all things considered.
Yeah, when you're talking about like 100 and some thousand word book, yeah.
But you got to add, like not often does the publisher tell you like
out.
Yeah.
Right. No, it was really cool when they, the acquiring editor, who is no longer with Orbit, but she was fantastic, came back with an editorial letter that was like, I love the world that you've built here, but I would love to see more of it. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to write more of it. And
I love that. Well,
just
I want to dive into that. How did you know what to expand on? Like, how did that process work? Like, you get to play and add 30,000 words. Where did you decide how to put them?
So again, it was like my neuroses from the past like 5 years of having, I know they tell you not to read Goodreads. I know they tell you not to read reviews, but I read all of them. And some of them like tore me up, and some of them, and again, we learn over time. It's like, you got to just take what's helpful, but it doesn't, as an author, especially a debut author, like, no, you read the really bad stuff and it kills you, but it is what it is. Yep. But like, I took all of it to heart and was able to, again, get perspective on it. And like, not that I'm not very good at like notes and outlines and that sort of thing, but like it was all in my brain. I was like, these are the things I know I need to change. Like even like things like names of places. Like there was a really weird, like, so in the Self Pub audiobook, the main nation was called Mercury, and this is not the case anymore. It was called Mercury, and it was spelled with an I, so not like the planet. But when the audiobook came out, because the narrator, of course, read it like Mercury, everyone was like got the wrong concept. They were like, "Oh, so this is like literally the planet.
Planet.
This is the planet Mercury." And like a lot, not everyone, but like some people were like would write a review and was like, "The combat codes takes place on a future Earth or a future planet Mercury," and I was like, "Oh no!" They read the audiobook. I was like, "Okay, there's
God."
Right." So I was like, "Okay, we're definitely changing that." Like,
Mm-hmm.
control, replace that, like that sort of thing felt so good being able to change it. And not only that kind of granular thing, but like so many things with the world building that like even little, we all know there's always like little holes with like plots and stuff like that. I was able to like shore up all of that. And then also like my editor gave me some like really good feedback about like characters, like a good editor will do. Like, building, there were some characters that I thought, in retrospect with the self pub version were a little too thin. Didn't have enough depth, and like certain character, like one of the main characters, Murray, who's one of the two main POVs, like in the first version had many less scenes. Like, so I gave him like an
Really?
yeah, like the second half of the book, like I was able to give him like not a new arc, but like add so much more depth to his like second half of the book arc, which
I
was
love
the advice.
that.
And Murray is
Murray is
amazing
like my
character.
favorite. Yeah, I love Murray. He's I
Yeah,
think my favorite
he's a lot.
character. So yeah,
Yeah, no, he's like this old badass like Mandalorian type,
I loved him.
lone wolf character.
Grumpy old
So
man. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
yeah, I had a lot of fun writing more of Murray.
Oh, dude, that's so great. Because it's like MJ, I've had the pleasure of like reading both the original, not the original, like the 2015 version, but like I guess like the second iteration of the combat codes, the self pub version, and then kind of like comparing that to this newest version.
Yeah, version
And it's
V3.
really
I guess
interesting. It's
it's
really
just like
interesting to see. Yeah.
like Silicon Valley, where they have like they have like the beta, and then they release different
Yeah.
iterations. I think this might
Yeah.
it might be the first book that's
I love it. Yeah, because
Hey man,
this is the first version I've read of it. So
yeah, you came from starting it in San Francisco and in Silicon Valley anyway, so it makes sense.
it was the
only
seed.
fitting.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, on that note, I kind of want to pick your brain about some of like you've gone through these many iterations of the book from the alpha to the beta version and all these different versions of the combat codes to get to the point where it's like you feel like this is, I imagine, like the best version of this book that you could do. How does it look?
Yes.
How does it feel for you to look back on your overall journey so far and kind of pick out some of the hardest but most valuable lessons that you've learned? And what advice would you give to other authors who are thinking about going down either publishing path, whether it's self-pub or trad pub?
Yeah, no, it's again, because it's been, I think, 10 years for this book and the series, and we're in this whole new phase of it with the upcoming release. It's almost like I think every version has its own lessons. So I think right now I'm closest to where it currently is. So it's hard for me to think about all the way back about the lessons I learned there. But again, I think obviously craft is something, striving towards always improving craft and looking at. I think that's something martial arts to use that analog again. I think looking at it as always being able to learn, and not looking at anything as like final, and I think that has led me to be able to keep pushing it through and trying to improve it. But on the most recent version, again, I think it's almost obviously the writing has improved a lot and the world has improved a lot, but like the relationships around trad publishing are something I've really tried to learn a lot. I think writing is a very can be very solitary, and like for me, I like being around people. Like, for example, I wrote a screenplay last summer with a really good friend, and it was like the most fun I've ever had. Like writing chapters back and forth. Like I would love to co-write something at some point. Like I had so much fun, like just sending chapters back and forth, especially if you find like a co-writer that really works well with you and there's no like ego that goes into it, where it's like you just takes what's best. So I have figured that out about myself, that I really like collaborating. I like collaborating with that sort of thing. So, what was your original question? Sorry, I got lost a little there.
What advice would you give to
like a tangent?
Yes,
no,
I totally
great,
went
man.
off the edge there.
What advice would you give to authors who are thinking about going down either publishing path?
Okay. I really do think it comes down to. It's a tough question, Adrian. I think
It's what I do, man.
Self-pub. I think self-pub, you have to be realistic now, especially in the current atmosphere, with your resources. I mean, because end of the day, if you're gonna self-pub, and you want to look to that to be your actual living in the future, you're gonna have to not only devote the time that you would, for any manuscript or for any book you're writing, a full-length novel, but you have to really invest a lot of capital resources, like to do it well. You have to hire artists, and it's getting. I think it's probably getting more expensive, to some extent. So I don't think that's for everyone. I mean, just based on that actual limitation, like that is a big advantage of trad. And like, obviously we can talk about like once you're in trad, certainly, you may need to invest more depending on how much you want to push it on your own. But at least, with trad, you can theoretically, just, have a manuscript and get through all the hurdles of getting an agent, and then getting through to editors on sub, and having it published. Theoretically, you can do it with zero, capital. So I think that almost should be the primary, logistical concern when you're determining self-pub versus trad. I mean, like literally, you have to look at your bank account and where your family life and whatever it might be, and figure out. And like, if you're gonna really go for broke with self-pub, you should. And again, this is not something I did, so, like probably, I mean, but I know I should have also done this, but like you need to just figure out how much you want to spend on this, like a business, as if you were opening up a small business, whatever it might be. I think and then also I think take into account, what you know about yourself, as far as, the type of personality you are, whether you like to, not that you, I mean, obviously not everyone falls into like, I'm not controlling. It's like, it's different aspects, right? But like, talk about what you enjoy. Do you like going out and hiring contractors? Like, do you like those sort of relationships? Is that, I mean, and you don't need to like it, but is that something that you're gonna be able to do, and at the same time stay on the ball, with your writing? And then also, I mean, again, I'm a pretty far out of self-pub at this point, so I don't, and it's such a fast evolving, sphere, that I don't want to give like, this is the advice of how to do it, because there's so many people that could do that better than me at this point. But as I understand it, you do have to produce, at a pretty regular clip, to be successful. So that's another thing to really like. Do you want to be the type of writer that's going to put out, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 novels per year? And of course, trad can do that again. So obviously, there's self-pub authors that are very successful that don't do that. They do like 1, which is fine. But it seems like that is the trend. And then, do you want to learn all the marketing? Like, I think to be successful, you do have to do some level of marketing, and PR and put the money into that and put the resources into that. I would say that's the main consideration.
And mental health will be affected on both ends of the spectrum.
I was gonna say,
Mental
on which
health
side, Adrian? Either one.
Right. Forget about your mental health for either one.
Yeah. Oh,
You're
I love
a writer.
that though.
Give up on that dream.
That's what you have to do. Jiu-jitsu. Pick up jiu-jitsu.
There we go. Yeah,
There you go.
center
There you go.
yourself that way. I think that's great advice, and I think that that's a really great point. Is it does for a lot of people. For myself, I went trad because I did not have the money to invest in self-pub, and to your point, I spent pretty close to $0 between. I spent a lot of time, but you would spend that anyways, right? So that's an important consideration.
And
It's something people don't think about.
I lost my trail of thought previously on talking. I was saying that either one, writing can be pretty solitary, given obviously you're writing a book and you need to be alone for a large portion of that. So that's something I was going to say you need to take into consideration too. I think both self-pub and trad, you have the ability to form a lot of awesome relationships, which I think has really kept me afloat for both of them. And that's something I think I really thrive on. Like self-pub, it has like such a fantastic community as I met Adrian through it. So many other awesome authors through SPFBO, and not only authors, but like bloggers and just people that are so awesome, so badass in this community that are just pushing each other's books. But you have to be willing to put yourself out there and try to form these relationships. And then, but really the same thing goes with trad. I think some people underutilize the potential of relationships. And it's hard in a lot of ways. Like there's this like undercurrent of like competitiveness even within like an imprint or like between imprints. And it's like everyone's competing, but it's really the same. Like you're all just like, there is the ability with trad to, help each other out and push each other's books up and create like discords and communities. And I think I think it's gotten a lot better, and there's just so much more information out there and ways to create these communities. But I think either way, you have to, if you're the type of person that can't just be like solitary like me, and for like mental health, I think you need to figure out how you're going to do that.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so important.
I'm super happy. It's like I met MJ, I met you both this way. If anyone
book people
out
are
there,
the coolest people.
Yeah, just reach out. Honestly, just like reach out. You have no idea how many authors I've got in touch with just by DMing them on Twitter, going to their website and finding their contact form or their email address and just emailing
Not
them.
everyone will be able to respond, but like it doesn't hurt to say hello.
No, don't get butthurt about it. But just like
Right. Just be realistic about people, and they have their own lives and going on. But I remember being like super intimidated for each step, like every step. Like when I first started self-pub and I was on like our fantasy Reddit and like seeing the big authors, or like even the big, like the self-pub authors that were well known, being like super intimidated by like everyone. And then like getting to meet some of them, being like, okay, these people are really cool. And then same goes with trad, like having read all these authors and being like big fans of them, and then actually getting to meet them and just seeing that they're also very cool. So
like, they're just a nerd too. Yeah.
Right.
Every time. Oh, that's awesome.
MJ loves to say book people are the coolest people. It's like
book people are the coolest people. Well, that's true. Like they say the old saying, like, don't meet your heroes. That doesn't apply if your heroes are book people, because they're going to be badass anyway. Like they're just cool people.
Yeah,
it's true.
I like it. So I'm curious, Alex, what is next on the horizon for you? I believe we'll be getting books 2 and 3 in the Combat Code Saga. So I'm curious to hear a little more about that, but also if you have anything outside of the series that you're working on or thinking about, just what's coming up next from you.
Yeah, so book 2 of the Combat Code series, Grievar's Blood, is I've handed it in. We're in. I owe copy edits. Oh, good. I think I have a deadline. I owe copy edits back very soon. And then after that, first pass, second pass, and I don't know how many MJ. How many passes are there? There's a lot of passes. That's another thing you learn with like
Thousands.
that. I have 1,000 passes.
Like, more pass pages again. It's good
Right.
though because they catch little. The copy editors are wizards. They find stuff that's like, how did
I
you
know.
even notice that?
And there's so many. That is something different with trad. I've found like so many hands are in those documents. Like just when you look at the track changes, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I haven't seen that person before.
Like, oh,
and like, I'm like,
it's
who
a
is
new-
that?
Face here. Yeah.
Nice. I'll try to write like little nice messages in my like stat or whatever. I'll be like, thank you. Like I've never met you before.
And then like colon smiley face. Like,
Aw.
stuff
How are you doing?
nice about it.
So cute.
I love that. You're using it like a texting conversation in the
Right.
track changes.
Yeah. I hope you've had a nice day. No. So Griever's Blood should be out in the fall, and I have a cover,
Nice.
which I'm really really excited to reveal. Which will be cool. It has a chocobo on the front cover.
Adrian's face. That's awesome.
It's beautiful.
And so then 6 months after that, the final book, Black Light Born, should, if we're on schedule, so that would be early or mid. That'll be spring 2024, I believe. And then I've written a few things in between all this. Like trad publishing is that's the other thing that I left out is like if you are very impatient. You can still do trad publishing, but you're going to be very impatient. Like,
You're gonna,
Yeah.
you're gonna.
You're gonna get frustrated.
especially. I'm not saying you can be impatient and do trad publishing, but be prepared to be very impatient.
You're gonna have a sad
Right.
time. You're gonna learn to be patient. I'm a
Learn
very
to
impatient person, and I have
fucking
been.
Me too.
Jay.
I've been beaten into submission with patience. Yes.
Yes. But during the time, like between acquisition and some contract stuff, I wrote a draft, which is really, really crappy. But I really love the idea. The comp is just Westworld meets Wolverine, but it's evolving a little bit.
Ooh,
So
interesting.
we'll see.
I'm already in.
Yeah, I'm excited about that, and I have a few other concepts that I'm hoping to pitch soon. But I won't pitch you guys before I pitch my editor. I should save it for him.
That's fair.
Aw.
That's fair. We don't have the
He'll
power to
appreciate
get
that.
it on the shelves. So
Yeah, we can't get that published for you.
I'm just gonna pitch you guys. I'm gonna use this as.
Hey, Adrian, I guess we're starting a small press. Let's go.
Fuck yeah, indie press, baby. Woo. Awesome, man. Well, yeah, dude, I love the idea of like Westworld meets Wolverine. However that ends up coming together. Your comp even has alliteration. That's brilliant.
That's all it's got. No.
Nothing else. It's a shallow
Feeling
idea.
the W's.
All right, buddy. Well, to close out, can you give listeners and viewers A, a good bit of soundbite writing advice, and B, tell us a weird or random fact that you find to be utterly fascinating?
Well, this is not that weird of a fact, but before this podcast, I was telling you guys that we were bunny sitting. And I didn't know this, but this is probably not weird. This is weird, but it's probably not random for people that know things about bunnies, but I did not know bunnies pooped so much. They just poop all the time. They're just like, I really had zero knowledge of how much it's like. They're like cows, kind of. I feel like they are
They shit and
constantly
walk,
just
pretty much.
Are
eating.
cows
I love
famous
bunnies.
for
I hope there's
pooping a
no.
lot?
I don't know.
Yeah. Have you ever been to a farm? Step in that shit
Are
all
you
the
from the
time.
Midwest?
I'm a city girl, all right? I'm not a farm.
Yeah, fucking
person.
farm girl from Detroit.
Detroit. Yeah, not so much.
I probably should it have been like a martial arts something to be on the.
I love it. No, bunny
I don't know.
poop. We're
That's
here
what I
for
got.
it.
Bunny poop, dude.
Bunny poop. That's all
Okay.
I got.
Now follow up bunny
Um,
shit with a nice bit of writing advice.
Let's see. Writing advice, and I'm trying to think of something that will actually be very uh, helpful. Also, back to something that I've had to learn over time. Back to talking about subconscious, and not in like a Freudian way, but like really just the most literal sense of like subconscious. I do find like, for me personally, my best drafting, specifically for drafting. Drafting for me is all subconscious, and the more I find that I'm out of that state, the less flow there is. So I really do find that, being able to break from your idea, from your awesome thoughts and your concepts and all the world building you've done in your head and jotted down, and all the character sheets you've created for your character, which is all super fun. All that's like a really fun part. Like when you actually are going to start your drafting, and you can have an outline, but like you sit down to write that scene, I feel like it's so helpful to like actually not be in that world building character sheet cluttered mindset. It's like you need to be like, I need to be out of that. I have to be like in more of like a flow state, but not like in a pressure. I mean, you can like pressure yourself, like I'm not in a flow state. What's wrong? Like that, you can fall into that trap. But like that's why I think exercise, like from a very logistical standpoint, like exercise, or like a lot of writers go on walks, and then like I do my best writing right after that, or like I used to, when I could actually write in the morning, like right when I woke up and my mind was like in this fuzzy kind of like just waking state. I think like that's when I can't write in the morning that so much anymore, but that's when I did a lot of good writing. Like when your conscious brain has not yet really taken a hold with all these firm ideas, and it's just kind of everything's like fuzzy. Uh, that's my advice.
Yeah, that's my jam too. It's like
Yeah.
get into that flow state, especially when you wake up in the morning, because it's like you're almost in this like semi
Dreamlike state.
hallucinatory state where it's like you're flowing out of your dreams and into the reality of the morning. And then,
Right.
yeah, like you can just vomit onto the page. And there's a
Yeah.
good
Right.
chance that there's going to be some really fucking amazing nuggets
Well, and
on
that's I
there.
like that
Yeah.
concept of the dream state, because that's when it is the best. Like when my writing is
Yeah.
going the best, it's when like literally I feel like I'm almost watching a film and transcribing it onto the paper.
Yeah.
Versus the days
Yeah.
when and you do have to force it, or at least I do some days, but those aren't the days when I get the good shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, I love that. I
Let's
think that's
just
great
try.
advice.
If you're trying too hard, Yoda, right? There is no try, or but
Whatever
it's
the fuck he
true.
said.
It's true. Yeah, Yoda.
You know, Yoda, that green guy,
Yeah.
whatever.
That green dude. Yeah, he spouts wisdom. Awesome. Well, Alex, thank you so much for hanging out with us today as well.
Thank you
For
guys.
anyone-
I had a great time.
Absolute pleasure, buddy. Yeah, always a great time hanging out with you and hearing your story. And for anyone who contributes to our Patreon at $10 or more a month, there will be an exclusive reading by Alex from the Combat Codes. So you can go check that out. Alex, can you let folks know where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, I have it's at Combat Codes for all the different sites. Just I think that at Combat Codes. And yeah, combatcodes.com. It's pretty simple.
Easy to remember.
Awesome.
I love it.
And the Combat Codes will be out through Orbit Books on June 13th. So get yourself a copy.
Yeah, June 15th for June 13th US, June 15th UK.
Yeah, because UK people do weird shit over there. But
right, Thursday release dates, weirdos. Just kidding.
Even if you don't love martial arts,
folks, we love you.
Yeah, even if you don't love martial arts, this book is fantastic and really well paced, and I highly recommend everyone check it out. You can also follow SFF Addicts on Instagram and Twitter at sffaddictspod, or you can follow me at Adrian M. Gibson. MJ, what about you?
Yeah, you can find me across all the socials at MJ Kuhn Books, or go to mjkuhn.com.
Brilliant. And go pre-order Thick as Thieves out July 25th.
Yes, please do.
And yes. And that's it for this episode. Stay tuned next week for part 2 with Alex to hear his mini masterclass on writing action scenes. For now, keep reading, keep imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts.